My name is Amy Zimmer. I'm the Communication and Outreach Specialist with Marion Soil and Water Conservation District, and we thank you for joining us today for our first Friday of October. We want to welcome Stephanie Hazen, a Master Gardener and Mellitologist. We'll be talking about gardening for wildlife today. A little bit of background about Stephanie. Stephanie moved to Salem in 1977 after graduating from Colorado State University School of Veterinary Medicine. She owned and operated a small animal exotics veterinarian clinic here in Salem, Oregon, until retiring in 2012. In her retirement, Stephanie took up photography, in doing so favoring natural history subjects such as native bees, flowers, and wildlife. Stephanie became a master gardener and a master mellitologist in 2018 through Oregon State University programs and enjoys sharing and educating about native plants, pollinators, animals, and birds.
So we're going to talk about creating a home for wildlife where you live. You can identify things real quickly if you put these apps, one or more of these apps on your phone. You can take a picture with your phone, and if iNaturalist is on your phone, a little eye will be under the picture, and you can look at things up. You can look them up and then back out of it, or you can look them up and then record them on iNaturalist. And because you're taking the picture with your phone, the data will include the GPS coordinates, the date, the time, and a little map. And one time my husband was looking for a identification of a flatworm in his garden, and some specialist in Australia identified it, and I'll never forget that. So people around the world are monitoring iNaturalist, so you can be a citizen scientist. So animals need the things that we need: food, shelter, safety, ability to reproduce. And so any property that you have control over, you can manage it in ways that allow wildlife to succeed. So in our place, we have bees, butterflies, snakes, gophers, moles, voles, deer, salamanders, snakes, possums, raccoons. And so they all, in order to survive here, they need water, food, nesting, habitat, and safety. To coexist, we have strategies for gardening, nesting habitat, and confining cats. You cannot move animals off of your property. You cannot move native animals off your property. You cannot trap or move squirrels, possums, salamanders, snakes. If you have a problem animal, you need to get a hold of Oregon Department of Wildlife. More than 800 species of birds occur in the United States, and some of them migrate seasonally, some of them live year-round. And nearly 500 species have been recorded in Oregon. Ray, my husband, keeps a backyard bird count, and we have seen 84 species if you include what's been flying over. So some birds are seed eaters and others are mostly berries and fruit eaters, but if they're nesting and raising baby birds, they're not going to be feeding them seeds or berries or fruits. They're going to be feeding them some kind of animal protein. If you're familiar with Doug Tallamy, he said a chickadee feeds its nestlings up to 570 caterpillars a day, and by the time they leave the nest, that adds up to 9,000 caterpillars. So what that translates in is to having host plants that caterpillars will eat, tolerating chewed plants, not using insecticides. In our yard, robins, cedar waxwings, bluebirds all eat berries, and invertebrates never, ever seeds. So this is a mountain ash with a cedar waxwing and a varied thrush. This is twinberry. I like twinberry because you can start it from stem cuttings. My husband's taken about 60 stem cuttings and he's rooting them in sawdust right now so that we can give them away at events. If you notice, there's berries and flowers on this plant at the same time, so you'll be feeding berry-eating birds and feeding hummingbirds and bumblebees all at the same season. A lot of birds need nest boxes. And because we don't have old trees and let woodpeckers make holes, we have to provide nest boxes. So the swallows all leave Oregon and migrate sometimes into Central and South America. And swallows never eat seeds, they never eat berries, they never eat off the ground, they eat only flying insects. These little sparrows will come to feeding stations in the winter. Cedar waxwings, we stopped on the side of the road and these cedar waxwings were actually eating the petals off these apple trees. I didn't know that they did that. And they catch bugs flying over rivers and eat fruits and berries. And evidently they eat apple petals. So I was volunteering for Salmon Watch yesterday, and we had maybe 50 band-tailed pigeons come in, and they were eating the elderberry leaves or elderberry flowers. And so in my reading, I found out that as they poop out these elderberry seeds or fruits, they actually improve seed germination. Something happens as it passes through them that makes the seeds more likely to sprout. Okay, all the sparrows need brushy areas, and they need to eat seeds and insects. You can find out about any bird's life history if you go to Cornell Lab's website, All About Birds. I use that all the time. I'm looking up a bird and it will give a map of its distribution. It will give its food, the pictures in various stages of its life cycle. So remember, call Cornell Lab's website, All About Birds, if you want to look something up. This is a picture of leaves in our yard under frost. You're probably hearing all kinds of people say, leave the leaves. Well, that's true. I had a neighbor bring me a mowed snake one time. He was cleaning up his yard and mowing, and he mowed right over a snake, which could not survive. But all kinds of insects will live under these leaves, and we see the towhee scratching all the time. And so it's important to leave leaf cover. It does not kill the lawn. It just breaks down into a natural mulch that actually helps the lawn. So we went for a walk in a nature preserve down in Corvallis one time. His name is escaping me. And they had snake boards. So we started putting boards out in the edges of our property. And if you lift them up in the summer, you'll find all kinds of things under there. So you can see the garter snakes that are under our snake board. Snakes like to live in places like that. And snakes are food. This is a great blue heron that I photographed at Ridgefield. And there's a red-tailed hawk that I photographed at Illahee Golf Course. Cassie was when she worked there, she was taking me on a tour. And so these guys definitely eat snakes. So we have the western terrestrial garter snake, Thamnophis elegans. And there's an orange one that you can find over at Basket Slough that's endemic to the Willamette Valley, which is kind of cool. People don't like gophers. They think gophers are a bad thing, but gophers actually aerate the soil. Snakes live in gopher holes, bees live in holes in the ground, and they aerate the soil. When we moved into this property, there was a little native camas patch, and last year the gophers moved in and it looked like it had been plowed, and I knew they were eating my camas bulbs, but not killing gophers. I just decided to tough it out. Camas came back, and since I read about that, I found out that camas needs to be thinned every once in a while, so I was looking for the bright side. Someone told me that the Native Americans didn't always just dig up one camas bulb and then another one. They find a gopher area and they would follow the gopher trail or holes, and the gophers actually store them. And so they would find the area in the gopher patch where they were stored and just scoop out a bunch of them all at once. So this is a camas pocket gopher. They're only in the Willamette Valley. You can identify them by their white chin. They're very easy to photograph. If you see them working a hole, just sit 5 or 6 feet away from that hole. They can't see very far. I imagine there's not much to look at underground. Anyway, if you're just very quiet and don't move, suddenly you can get a nice close-up of a gopher. I read recently that the Missoula floods inundated our area, and there were patches in the Willamette Valley that didn't get inundated, and the surviving gophers are where we got our camas pocket gopher, and that's why they're only here. Gophers are important food for great horned owl chicks, and great horned owls don't make their own nests. They usurp red-tailed hawk nests and other nests. You can encourage them by putting up a platform type structure and a few sticks and things, and they may move in. when I go for a walk somewhere, if I hear birds scolding, I look around and sure enough, you can find the owl. Everybody's dive bombing them. And I found a nest on a broad limb out at Willamette Mission Park one time, and it was just covered with moss, and it was a natural nest. If you don't want gophers chewing your favorite plants like your camas, you can create underground netting for your plants with gopher wire. So you can use a pot as a shape and shape that, and you don't bury the pot, you bury the gopher wire, plant your plant, fill it with soil, and supposedly the gophers can't get through that. We moved out in the country on 1.7 acres, and the gophers were visibly pulling down the tomato plants. You could sit there and watch the tomato plants just disappearing underground. And so I did everything. I tried hosing them and I tried scaring them. My grandfather used to put stakes in the ground that where a windmill went around and went tap, tap, tap. That did no good. So I saw something online where there's a beautiful garden in Southern Oregon where a lady has all stock tanks and she paints them and puts them up on the decorative rocks. So we put the stock tanks out and the gophers can't get in. And lo and behold, you don't have to bend over to weed. And the thing that happened though was our dog jumped in and was biting off the sprinkler heads, but she's since gotten bored with that. So native plants that produce berries that can be eaten by birds, you can see twinberry, Oregon grape, native blackberries, on and on. If you go online, you can find out where all of the soil and water conservation districts in Oregon and Washington have their native plant sales. And so you could schedule a shopping spree. Marion Soil and Water District tends to have a spring and fall one, but so does Polk County and Yamhill County and all over the place. And it's hard to find native plants in local nurseries. Portland, not so much, but Salem, it's very hard to find native plants. I interviewed a nursery that's about a mile from where I live. I asked her about the use of insecticides, and she says, well, I can't sell a chewed up plant. I spray everything monthly, whether it needs it or not. So those are questions to ask when you buy nursery stock. Has it been sprayed with insecticides? Sometimes they use long-acting insecticides. So sometimes it's good to take a trimming, see if it will grow by sticking it in water and rooting hormone, or sticking it in the ground, or collecting seeds. You can get free seeds from most Marion County Master Gardener events. We source native plant seeds from a local grower, and our master gardeners package them, and we give them away at various events. We do sell them at our plant sale, which is in the month of May in Salem. So you will have predators come into your yard. This Cooper's hawk came into our yard. We don't use bird feeders. We scatter seed on the ground. Using single feeders will keep the birds all in one place and make it easier for the predators to get them. Also, if you're not keeping them clean, it's a good way to transmit disease. So if we're going to use some sort of feeder, it will be a plate, a dinner plate up on a plant stand, and we will wash it and change it every day. But we have some natural walkways through our yard, and so we scatter seeds, and there's no competition between the birds. Everybody gets to eat at once. You need to be caterpillar growers if you want to support baby birds. And so native plants that feed native butterflies, here's a list. The most important tree to have in your yard is an Oregon white oak. It supports several hundred species of birds, mammals, and insects. Nettles are actually important for some butterflies, and we do have native nettle plants. Okay, this is evening primrose, and it's got seeds right now in our backyard. It's got flowers on the top and seeds all along the stalk. So we're still feeding hummingbirds and bees while the chickadees and the goldfinches are eating the seeds. This is Wyethia. And this is a native plant that makes seeds somewhat like sunflowers that's going to be feeding animals in the winter. Goldenrod is a very important fall blooming plant. It can get 5 or 6 feet tall. You could actually use it as a hedge or a divider between properties. It blooms late, so it's good for bees, and it provides seeds for our smaller birds. And you can trim it back if you want to. So here's a chickadee on sunflowers in our yard, and a goldfinch eating these Wyethia seeds. These are the evening primrose, and there's a downy woodpecker on sunflower. So having a little bit of a messy garden, not trimming things back all the time, leaving things out all winter, you'll be providing natural food all year round. In the United States, there's 60 million plus free roaming cats. They're not native birds or not native predators, and they kill birds and mammals every year by the millions. If you have cats, keep them indoors or have a cat patio. A coined word, catio, is the name for a cat patio. I personally, being a veterinarian, do not support trap, neuter, and release programs. It's not good for the cats, and it's not good for the environment. If you want a cat free roaming in your yard, but you don't want it going all around the world, if you have a bend to the top of the fence, you'll keep cats in. If you want to keep cats out, you turn the bend the other way around. Portland used to be Portland Audubon. Now it's got a different last name. They support a catio tour in September. And you can sign up, and it's a self-guided tour where you go through neighborhoods and people have open houses, and you can see how they're keeping their cats in. So the website is Cats Safe at Home, Portland's Fall Catio Tours. And I went on one, and people have daylight basement windows with little cages. They have all kinds of innovative ways to let their cats out, but keeping the cats safe and keeping the birds safe. I asked everyone why they did it, and not one person on the tour said they wanted to keep wildlife safe. They were all interested in not having their cats get eaten by coyotes or run over by cars, but there was very little awareness about the impact of cats on the environment. So here's the Cats Safe at Home website. This year was their 13th annual catio tour. I went a few years ago and I thought it was great. So which setting provides habitat and why? The left-hand side is our place. There's a seasonal creek, and all these plants were there to begin with. The right side is along Hawthorne Street, and I can't think of the name of it. So a trimmed backyard doesn't really provide home for ground nesting birds. So we have lots of spotted towhees. They're going to be nesting where they can find a hiding place. Robins, they're going to be up on platforms. We put a platform up in our garage, and we get robins most of the year. You can see them digging for worms in the leaves that we left. Brush piles are important. Our brush piles out here have quails, snakes, insects, rabbits. When we moved out here, we got rid of blackberries, and so the property looked rather bare. And he found out where the Boy Scouts were recycling Christmas trees, and he had them bring out brush piles. And so we created instant brush piles to take the place of the blackberries we got rid of all at once. And those brush piles rotted away in just a very few years, so you have to keep your brush piles going. Whenever you remove invasive plants, they were a home for somebody. They were providing nectar, pollen, something. And so you can do your removal sequentially unless your neighbors have plenty, and make sure you're planting things to replace the purpose they were serving. Think about ground nesting birds, things like killdeer, they'll nest right in a driveway. If you're on the edge of farm fields, you'll be probably seeing killdeer nests where people walk. So this is just demonstrating that song sparrow and the towhee that want to nest on the ground and want a complicated, brushy environment. So back in the day, we used to have a lot of more dead trees. And so woodpeckers will peck holes in dead trees, creating cavities for other birds. Now people take away all those dead trees. And so you need to provide nest cavities. This is our yard, and we didn't want that particular tree. Instead of taking it out, we had it topped and limbed and girdled. And now it's a tree that's soft enough that woodpeckers are making holes. And this little western screech owl moved into a woodpecker hole down the street. He comes to our house sometimes and lives in a wood duck box, but sometimes he lives down the street. We don't know if he's a he or a she, but we named him Fred. So these are flickers that nested in holes in our yard in a dead tree that we created. These are bluebirds that came down the street. Ray gave them nest boxes, and right away bluebirds moved in. So this is just demonstrating how they're feeding their young insects and caterpillars, not seeds. It's fun to have these things on your property. Make sure you're not opening the box because the chicks will jump out and fledge prematurely and you can't catch them, and it's too early for them to have fledged. In the fall, we clean out the boxes, but we leave the boxes up as adult birds will roost in the night to get away from the weather. And you can see a little caterpillar on an oak leaf. So we discovered when we put up bluebird boxes that in a good year, they can have 3 generations of fledge or 3 generations of bluebirds. And when the female goes to make another nest box and lay eggs, some of the teenagers from the first brood will feed the second brood. And we buy dried mealworms online. And so that's how we got to see all this going on. Hummingbirds will nest in the winter. So you have to be careful when you're pruning things and doing lawn care. Look before you start pruning, because you could even have hummingbirds nesting in January, February, March. If you're going to feed hummingbirds, you want something easy to clean. I like the flat ones that you can open up and scrub out in the sink and put in the dishwasher. The long tube ones, you're not likely to get all those places clean. And that's too much food to put out at once. I always say clean your hummingbird feeders daily in the hopes that you'll at least do it every other day or every third day. Hummingbirds' mouths can get so infected they can't eat from mold in hummingbird food. So you want to clean it frequently, and it's good to put it where you see it, right outside your kitchen window or your living room windows, so that you're reminded to clean it. This is a sapsucker drilling holes in a tree. People think they're killing the tree, and they're not. You see the sap draining out of the tree. That's going to feed a hummingbird in the winter. So you don't need to worry about sapsuckers killing your tree. These are bush tits, and bush tits are community nesters. You can see the male bush tit with the dark eyes and the female with the white iris. While there'll just be a male and a female in that nest, there could be a whole community of bush tits taking care of those babies. And again, they like brushy areas. I've seen them at Minto on a walk and in thick tree cover. But if you have a perfectly pruned tree, you're probably not going to get bush tits. This is looking over the fence into the fields behind our backyard, and there is a perch there for kestrels to hunt from. I think that's probably a bluebird. You see a metal sleeve on that post. That's to keep raccoons from climbing up and raiding the nest box. Swallows and bluebirds will look out over a field. We've quit putting things out in the sun because of global warming. We take care of these nest boxes on a farm that does not belong to us, and the nest boxes were already out in the field facing a pond, so they get bluebirds and swallows. So on days over 90 degrees, we staple aluminum foil wrong side out or shiny side out, but not at the entry hole. And that gives enough reflection of the sun rays to keep the box at least the same as ambient temperature. Otherwise, the boxes can go 20 degrees above ambient temperature and kill eggs and kill chicks. So it's better to put them in the shade looking out to a field, because they do need a clear flight path in and out. A swallow is not going to find its way into a forest to find a nest. It wants one out in the open. So there's beaver wrens and house wrens that come to people's properties, and they'll rake count 1,900 sticks in a house wren box. House wrens will go in and empty the eggs out of swallow boxes. So when you are planting these swallow and bluebird boxes, you don't want them next to a brushy area where wrens live, because wrens cannot tolerate people in their neighborhood. They will fill 9 boxes with sticks just to keep somebody else out. You can attract different kinds of birds by the size of the opening of the hole that you create. And so this tells you what different birds prefer. You can also prevent things like house sparrows by making holes a certain way. You see how dangerous it is for Ray, my husband, putting up this owl nest box. We don't do that anymore. We put all the nest boxes at eye level, and the birds use it anyway. We're not up on dangerous ladders, and we can clean the boxes out easily, and we can check for problems. So this is a way not to mount a nest box. House sparrows were introduced to New York in the 1850s. They're everywhere. They'll claim a territory and they'll kill all the eggs and the birds in their vicinity. We take care of maybe 20 nest boxes around a pond in a farm area, and the neighborhood has encroached, and so the house sparrows have moved in. And when we went out in the fall a couple of years ago, virtually all the swallows were dead in the nest. The mothers had their skulls cracked open, and the eggs were all broken. And if there were any chicks, they had their skulls open. We put out traps and actually kill the house sparrows in that area so that the swallows can live. Starlings are another problem. A nest box size 1.5 inches smaller will deter starlings, but they will take over anything in a cavity. So even if a woodpecker is already there, the starlings will kill them and move them out. Nearly 1 billion birds per year are killed by striking windows in the United States, and about 44% of those are on 1 to 3-story buildings. If you want to get an idea of how to make these string barriers for your yard, you want the strands small enough so that they don't think they can fly through it. Certain times of the day, the reflections in your house window look like a place to fly into. And this is our house. So my husband put up paracord strands, and they are fastened on the top and the bottom. On the sides, before that, he'd made loose box frames of screen that didn't keep bugs out, but you can see they were hanging, so there was no reflection. But we wanted to look out our living room windows, so that's what I'm looking through right now. I'm sitting in our living room and looking out through those very strings. Water, if you put little rocks in the water, bees and butterflies can get access to it and not drown. Ray likes to use these paint trays. You can wash them, and they're graduated, and that's an automatic timer filler, irrigation system. I had put out a big oil pan, and I drowned a whole group of quail chicks. They jumped in, they couldn't get out, and I came out, and there were all a bunch of dead birds. So now we use these graduated trays. The water should be shallow, and it should be cleaned every other day, and you can hook it up to a sprinkler, you can hand fill it, but it should be clean because they'll poop in it. And at our house, they just come in every night. We've got this shallow water container at Wild Birds Unlimited. If you have a pond, you should have an eye toward cleaning your pond. You will bring in bullfrogs. They're not native to Oregon. They eat western pond turtle eggs. They eat everything that fits in their mouths. If you have a pond and you're not attending to it, you'll have mosquitoes, and baby birds can drown. So a pond comes with responsibilities for keeping it clean and having shallow areas, and I think it's a little complicated for the average person. Our neighbor called us, and night this little screech owl was caught in their wire cage around their tomatoes. So we freed it, And it was so thirsty, it had been struggling for a long time. And so this is a picture I took in the middle of the night. It went and drank and drank and drank from their bird bath. You can have little floating spraying things that are battery operated. Anyway, you can be creative. If you're interested in native plants for Willamette Valley, you can download this free. This is published in Portland, and it's called Native Plants for Willamette Valley Yards. So native plants support native insects, which support native birds, and it goes on and on. Portland has also made a nice publication about protecting birds during construction, tree pruning, tree removal, and other activities. For most birds, doing your activities like this in the winter is a good idea, but still, hummingbirds are nesting in the winter, so you really have to pay attention. So this is the end.
Thank you, Stephanie. That was a wonderful presentation.
Great. Well, if there's any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Are there any natives you wouldn't recommend if someone has dogs? Anything poisonous?
Well, all of the milkweeds are poisonous, but I've never heard of a dog eating them. So when I was a veterinarian, dogs ate grass and vomited, but I never treated a dog for ingesting a poisonous plant. I know that cats in the house will munch on house plants. And my neighbor, I gave milkweed to, and she said her deer eat the milkweed and don't get sick. So I think even if they are poisonous, it would take a lot. And I'm not sure that unless you had a specific dog with a fetish for houseplants, I don't think you need to worry. So,
And it looks like we've got another question here. Can you please describe how you tag a butterfly?
we had them in that screen house so that we didn't have to go catch them. You know, I've followed some butterfly sites and people are catching them in nets and grabbing them, and I think that's dangerous. So we came up with when they were a chrysalis, we would clip it off and clothespin it to a line inside that screen house. When they emerged, they're really soft. And so if they emerged in the afternoon, we kept them overnight. If they emerged in the morning, we kept them till late afternoon. And then you hold them like this. You put them between your fingers. And then Dr. David James is the biologist at Washington State University who provides the stickers for the Western monarch population. I do a whole nother presentation on monarch butterflies. And our Western monarch population doesn't cross the Rocky Mountains, doesn't go down to Mexico, we don't think, but they go to the Southern California coast. So we have the Western monarch population stickers have nothing to do with the Eastern monarch population that goes down to Michoacan, Mexico. So you hold them between your fingers, and there's a specific place you're trying to stick them so you're not interfering with their bodies. And then when they're hanging like this in the trees in Southern California, you want the letters to be right side up for the viewer. So you want it to be so that someone could take a picture, find out that serial number and Dr. James's email address, and then report those numbers to him, and he would know where the butterfly started and where they ended up. That butterfly of ours, by the time the season was over, it had provided new information. It was sighted 7 times in 3 locations, and it lived 6 or 7 months. And at the time, people didn't even know they lived that long. So they're always finding out something new. Also, my presentation on butterflies shows that the last couple of years, the population overwintering in Southern California got down to 2,000 individuals, down from 1 million individuals, 20 years ago. And it's rebounded a little bit, but it's still only in the thousands. It just so happens that we are monitoring monarch butterflies, but it's happening to all the butterflies because of environmental destruction, lack of host plants, insecticides, getting hit by cars, but mostly lack of the environment that they need, their host plants for their babies and their nectaring plants and places to overwinter, or environmental sprays. So butterflies in general are in a tremendous crash. So that means our birds are going to crash because there's no caterpillars for them to eat, and it just goes on and on. So that was your answer to how to put a sticker on a butterfly. It was a little extended there. I'm not sure if it's October 18th, but it's sometime in October. We're having a pollinator connection. We're having 4 lectures, and I am one of them. And I'm going to talk about butterflies and monarchs and just butterflies in general.
It was very informative, Stephanie. I really appreciate how you connect not only the wildlife and the birds and the mammals, but also the pollinators. And it's the full ecosystem. It's the full web, and everyone has their part in that web. And you really hit on different ways at all scales. Not everyone has a large property, but it seems like there's something that everyone can do at all scales to help support wildlife within our own backyards.
Yep, that's my hope. Thank you.
We've got very informative, love the photos, love the videos on your slides. So thank you, Katie. Thank you so much, Stephanie, for joining us today. Stephanie will be presenting at the Scottish Rite, like she mentioned, in October, if anyone wants to listen to more on butterflies. And we really appreciate you joining Marion Soil and Water Conservation District for our first Friday of October. And we hope to see you on our future First Fridays.